All right, what's up everyone? This is Don with Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for the all-day multi-sport Photoshop template. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through all of the layers, all the features, all the options, hopefully cover anything and everything that anyone might need to know in order to get the most out of this design, get the best images possible. Before we jump into the template, just a few things. I'm going to scroll down here. This template has been a huge hit with my athletes for social media images, and so I've set it up where you have some options. You can get some different looks, but this has been great for game day images. We've used it for stat milestone images, which you can see here. Used it for committed images. Just make sure that you have committed spelled right. And you can do full body, you can do partial, just really have a lot of fun with it. But it also works great for traditional team and individuals. So you can see here, I've made some images that kind of showed just by turning on and off some layers and switching up some of the font options, you can get some different looks. 3/4 body, so you don't have to deal with any feet showing. Same thing up here, showing some different fonts being used that are included, which we'll cover. But anyways, it's pretty versatile. I think you'll be able to use it for quite a bit. Let's jump into this thing. Before we open up the very first layer folder here, a few tips. It's always probably a good idea to just go through and turn on and off some of these layer folders, and that just kind of helps you see where everything's at, helps you navigate it a little better. Something else that's a good idea is to make sure that you can see everything that I've written on these layer folders. Sometimes it gets a little long. I'm trying to give you information that will help you. So if you can't see it, if you just hover right here on the edge, you can move it out in, you can control it like that. So let's jump into it. Very bottom folder, let's look at it. We've got our change background color, so that's pretty simple. Just double click here, open up your color picker, use the slider here, and you can find the color that you're looking for. If you already have a color code, you can just paste it right in. So speaking of color codes, before you close this out, I suggest that you copy this color code, and I'll explain why here in just a second. The next thing we have is a subfolder that includes all of the repeating text layers. So you'll see it says Go Dogs in the background. It's very subtle. Tried to simplify this as much as possible. Nobody wants to go through and update all of this text. So the way I set that up is by making all of the text layers smart objects. I put the very first text layer in this smart object, which is right here labeled in green, and I put all of the others in this subfolder. So the idea is that you don't ever have to even open this subfolder. Instead, you want to open this smart object to update all of the text. To open it, you just click right here, double click I guess, and it'll bring up in a separate window. I like to double click this T in the layer panel because that highlights everything and takes me right to my text tool. So now you just start typing what it is that you want it to say. I'm going to go with game day. I'm going to throw in an exclamation mark because I like that, and hit the space bar one time. Now if you hover over the first letter, click and drag, you can highlight everything. Hit Control or Command C to copy it. Now hit the right arrow key, it'll bring you to the right side of what you've typed. Now all you have to do is hit Control or Command V to paste, and just continue hitting Control V, Command V until you fill up the space. It's probably good right there, but you can run off of the space. It's not a problem. Hit the check mark to commit it. Now you can close it out, hitting this X right here. It's very important that you hit save, otherwise you'll have to do it over. By hitting save, it'll update all of the lines for you. So that's a very common question that I get. Next we have, well actually on the same folder, we have a gradient mask. So that's what gives you this gradual fade here. It should be fine, but if anybody needs to adjust it, the quickest and easiest way is probably just to click on this chain link here and that will unlock the layer mask from the layer folder. And so now with the layer mask selected, make sure you have the move tool selected as well. You can use your up and down arrows, or you can just click on an anchor point, hold down shift and drag it up if you need it higher. If you want it lower, you can drag it down. I'm not going to demonstrate it, but another option is to use your gradient tool with black to white and to just select this mask and click and drag up and down to reset it a brand new gradient. That is also an option. Plenty of YouTube videos on that if you need to brush up on it. Next, we have change color of repeating text. This is clipped to the repeating text folder. So self-explanatory. We'll open it up and change the color of your repeating text. So this is where if you paste that color code in, which apparently has not been retained, but that's okay. We'll just copy the color code again from the very bottom layer, come up here, and we're going to paste it in. So this will make the text invisible because it's the same exact color as the background. But the reason I suggest this is it just gets you to a good starting point. It's my personal opinion that it's better to make this very subtle than to, I guess, set a color that creates a lot of contrast. And just so you can see, if I go straight black, that's very bold. It's very distracting to me, kind of distracts from your subject image. It doesn't mean that there's never a time, to do it this way, but just generally speaking, I think it's better to just start with your background color and then start coming down. Just click a little bit further down, a little bit further down, and get it to a point where you can read it and you can see it, but it's not too distracting and it looks good. And then once you have the color that you like, or you find a good spot, then you can click OK and you're done. Let's close that up. Next one that we have here is our vignettes. So if I open that up, it's got 4 layers. It's got 2 exposure adjustment layers and 2 levels. And you can actually come in here and click on any of these and adjust the exposure, adjust the levels. You could also decrease the opacity if you want a little bit less. But probably the easiest thing to do if you want less is to just reduce the opacity on the actual folder itself. So if I turn it off, you can see it basically just darkens the corners and the edges. It's very soft and subtle, but it helps draw you into your subject. It makes it look a little more three-dimensional, not quite as flat. The next one that we have is a center soft spotlight, adjust opacity. This is similar to a vignette, but it basically creates this little lighter, brighter, soft circle behind our subject. If I turn it off, you can see that the background text is a little more prominent up to the edge of your athlete. I just thought it looked a little better by having this. I set it to 75% opacity on the folder itself. So just like the vignettes, you can increase, well, you can adjust the opacity. You can bump it up to 100 if you want it to be more prominent. You can bring it down, or you can actually come in here and adjust these manually if you want to. More than likely, you will probably just leave it just like it is. Next, we have our upper and lower accent layers. Let's open that up. I'm calling them accent layers. It's basically these borders. It's the top and the bottom, you can see, and I have them separated into upper and to lower. Both of them are basically the same layers, just position at the top and then position at the bottom. So let's just start at the bottom here and see what we have. Looks like I need to rename this. This is actually in the lower folder, but it says upper, but you'll get the idea. If I turn it off, you can see it's basically this little accent stripe. Change the color by clicking color overlay. It's very easy. Click in the box, select your color. You can move it up. I use the arrow key. You can move it up if you want it to show more, move it down if you want to show less. Pretty simple there. Next we have the foreground shape, so you can see what that is there. It has a drop shadow, so you can see a little darkness here It's very subtle, but you can turn that off or on. It just makes it a little more three-dimensional. You can always adjust it if you feel the need to. The color is controlled the same way by clicking on color overlay, clicking on this box, selecting the color that you want. Next we have lower thin stripe. So you can see if I turn that off, we lose that. And so to change the color of that, you would click on the word stroke, click on the color box, pick the color that you want, hit OK. Before you close it, if you want to increase the size or decrease the size, you can. More than likely you'll probably just leave it the way that it is. But once you have everything the way that you like it on the lower one, rather than trying to repeat it all on the upper, you can actually just come to the first layer, right click, copy layer style, and come to the bottom layer of the upper folder, right click, and paste layer style. And then you can do the same for the middle layer to the middle layer and the top layer to the top layer. And that might save you a little bit of time instead of having to do them both manually. Of course, you can turn all of them off. And this is what I was talking about earlier. This, to me, even though it's a little simpler, it still looks great, especially if you're going to show feet. Personally, that's my opinion. So that's an option to turn that off. Next, we have our paper texture overlay. If I zoom in here, you should be able to see it's extremely subtle. So on small prints, you may not even notice it. Larger prints, you might, banners, you might. You can play with the levels if you want it to show up a little more. It's just the more that the texture shows, the darker it's going to make your background color. So just keep that in mind. You can always even turn it off. Brightens it up just a pinch. Next we have our upper text layer. So let's open that up and have a look. Let's see. I broke this into a few folders. I've got font option 1, which is a font called Streetwear. I really like this font. And then I have a font option 2, which is Hey November, a nice brush stroke font. So you can pick the one that you want to use. We'll open up the first one, which is the Streetwear font. What I have done is put in a few options in here. So obviously you can see your team name is right here. I have Lady in case you need to add that. You probably will have to scale and position it, somewhere that looks good. I just so happen to have this nice little pocket to drop it into, but obviously different team names will look different. Let's turn those off. I went ahead and put in an option for committed, and I put an option for game day. Not that you couldn't just type over this team name, but you'll notice it's got these little swooshes here. You'll have to do those manually. And so I just went ahead and did committed and game day, just so you have a quick, easy option where you don't have to try to go to your glyphs and add those swooshes. Since we're on the subject, let me explain how to do that. So if we are, just about everything that I can think of ends with S, but let's go with, let's see, we'll say another one that I do often is coyotes. So I've typed in, I've misspelled, good at that. I've typed in coyotes. We'll commit it. And it's kind of small, so we'll scale it up. We'll position it. Okay, so that looks nice, but we lost our swoosh. So how do we fix that? We'll go ahead and double click on this, I call it a T box. Click on that, it highlights everything. Now we can come up here, click and drag to the right to just highlight the last letter. Now I got it where it just pops up with the options right here, which is cool. So you see you have this tail. If you get this window, just you can hit the arrow and it opens up your glyphs. But let's say for some reason that's not coming up. I have glyphs in my toolbar here. You can add it if you don't already have it, or you can, if you have it, you just click on it. If you need to add it, come up here to window and it's in there. Just click on glyphs, it'll show up. So looking at glyphs, this is all the alternates for that particular letter. You also have the option to, let's see, if I can get it to work here. Well, it's just showing, okay, entire font. There you go. You can see everything by scrolling through here. You've got all kinds of options. Up here, I noticed, and I even used it for the committed version, you've got these upper swooshes, which look kind of cool. But just scroll through here, you can see all the options that this particular font offers, which is one of the things that makes me like it so much. But that is how you would get the, there we go. Hit the check mark, get this out of the way. Now you have your swoosh. So hopefully that explains that. Let's get back. There we go. In fact, I like to just start over sometimes. Okay, now let's look at customizing the actual text colors. So we'll use this team name layer for example. I went ahead and set it up so that the color is controlled using a gradient, and so that's why you see this darker shade of orange that comes to a lighter shade of orange, and I think that just looks better. If you don't want to bother changing the gradient, you can just turn it off, and then if you come up to your character or your properties, you can just use this color picker. But if you take just a little bit of time, and I'll show you how, just double click the gradient, come in here, click on this colored box. So this will open up your gradient editor. So it's very simple. You've got this little box here, which represents the color that you will see towards the lower portion of your text, and it will transition to the color that you have set in this little box here, which is in the upper portion. So you can start with either, but if you click on one of them, it will show the color that it's set to in this little box. If you click on the box, now you can pick your starting color for the lower portion of your text. Once you get it how you like it, just hit OK. I went out too far. Come over, click on this right-hand side, and do the same thing. Just get a little bit lighter. And you can play around with it until you get it just right. Once you have it how you like it, hit OK. I always, when I'm working with a gradient and I find one that I like, I hit New, and that's probably why I have such a mess here, but it'll add it right here. And so if you need to reference, like if you're going to use a different file, it'll save that gradient in there, so it'll make it a little easier and save you some time. Let's back out of that. Let's see, we have our inner shadow, which you can see is very subtle here, just adds a little dimension. You can open up the inner shadow, you can adjust the opacity, the distance, the size if you want to change the appearance of that. I have drop shadow turned off, which I'll explain here in a second. We have our stroke, so you see this white stroke outline. You can change that by clicking on the word stroke, and you can select your color here. You can also adjust the size with the slider, make it bigger, make it smaller. You can play around with that. I'll hit cancel. I have another stroke outline that is turned off, but if you turn it on, you can see it adds a second stroke outline, which in some cases can look really good. In this case, I think that looks good. So if you want to utilize that, change it the same way, you just have to turn it on or leave it off. It's an option for you. So all of this applies to all of these in here. I do have the drop shadows turned off on the text layers because I decided to add it to the actual font folder. The reason for that is that it wasn't actually starting the drop shadow from the edge of the stroke outline. It was starting it from the edge of the actual text, and so it gave a weird look to it. So I found by putting it on the actual folder, it would start from the edge. So if you have two strokes, or you make the stroke wider, it's just going to apply to the edge of it instead of starting at the edge of the text. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's why I set it up that way. So next we have our alternate font, which is Hey November. This one's a little bit simpler. You'll have to type in game day or committed or anything like that, but I did have the lady and the team name. It's the same thing. It's got two stroke outline options. It's got a drop shadow that's on the font folder itself. Pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. This one does not have a gradient overlay. You can add one if you want to, but I went ahead and went with a solid color on this one. So up here in your character panel or your properties, you can change the color just using the color picker. Very easy, very simple. Now I have a, it's turned off by default, but I have a sport subtext option. Let's open that up. Same thing, I have the drop shadow on the folder itself instead of the text layers. Looks like I missed something on naming and color coding this particular layer, because it should say sport and it should be this seafoam color. But here we have our Provocali font option. And then if you turn that off and turn this one on, you have the Hey November option. You can pick which looks good depending on what font combinations or variations you're going with. That's one cool thing about this, is you can mix and match some of these font combinations and find something that works instead of the way it comes right out of the box. Same thing with the stroke outlines. Control the color the same way. And then of course it's not a gradient overlay for the color on this. You would just use your character panel or properties. All right, let's close that up. I think that's everything with the upper text layers. Let's turn this off, close it up. So the next thing we have is wrinkle texture over upper text. So these are some wrinkle textures that I have the levels set just right where it just shows the wrinkles only. And you can actually click on one of these anchor points and you can move it around if you really want to finesse it. The same thing with this one. You can move it around once you have your new text in there. At the very beginning of the video, when I was showing you the social media images, a lot of them had the text in front of the athlete, and it does not come set up that way. So if you want that look, it's very simple. You'll want to start with this green upper text layers folder, hold down Shift, and click on this top wrinkles texture overlay. So you have all three of these highlighted. Then you just click and drag just above this orange color picker here and let go. So now it's above your subject. Now you would have to position it. You can click on this anchor point or any of them, and then you can hold down Shift to keep it in line and get it where you like it. And with all of this selected, if you want to scale the text larger or smaller, it's good to do it with all of this highlighted so it keeps everything in place. So if you want it bigger, if you need it smaller, you can do that. So let's back up and get it how we had it. Next we have our subject image options folder. Let's open that up. In here you will see two folder options. I had to set it up, or I chose to set it up with a folder for full body and then a different folder, subfolder for 3/4 body or no feet. So let's talk about this no feet option, which will probably be used most often. In that I actually put another subfolder. So I'll explain that. If we open it up, I have a sample subject image folder in here. I actually left a lot in here instead of just merging it all, so you can kind of see some of the things that I do to the image. Maybe not something that everybody would want to take the time to do, but more than likely you'll delete it. Of course, you'll at least turn it off and drag and drop your subject images into this same folder. I have this layer mask here, which is a gradient mask. So if I come up here and I turn off this text, you'll be able to see it. It provides like a gradual transition, a fade. And then I went ahead and put this layer mask on the actual folder, not the subfolder. So what that does is, in the event that you were to change this gradient mask and you had it where the fade extended out beyond the edge of this lower border, this is going to keep anything from overlapping this and showing. So just for example, if I turn that off and I were to unlock the layer mask and I were to bring it down, it's going to start showing up. So I just want to make sure that if you decide to adjust this layer mask, that it doesn't, I guess, start to show over this, if that makes sense. Since we're on the subject, if you do turn off these upper and lowers for your image, and you do something that is full body, let's see here. Well, I guess if you use full body, it will be in this separate folder, so that wouldn't apply. But what I was going to say is that you can turn this off so that it doesn't have like a weird sudden drop off. Let's see if I were to move this where you could see what I'm talking about. It's just possible. Oh, turn it on. Yeah, see what I'm talking about? So you can turn that off if you need to. Let's see. Let's look at this. Let's get it back the way it was. Let's look at the full body option. Turn that off, turn this on. Again, I have a sample image in here. You can delete, just to kind of give you a visual. This is where you'll drop your full body images, scale and position them. I did put this little layer in here. It's turned off. It's just a soft ground shadow. It's not something to use as a full shadow. You need to at least do contact shadows, but what I like about this is that you can click on any of these and you can scale, make it long and more narrow. You can make it as small as you want. You can adjust it. You can even angle it. You can do all kinds of things, but what I like to do is just have one there that's untouched and just duplicate them. So on my Mac, I'll hold down Option and click and drag up till I see that blue line, and so I've duplicated it. I can duplicate as many as I want, and so I can scale them how I need. Pick one, move it. So if I had 2 feet, I could have them underneath there, or if you have a group, you can just work with these and build these up just subtly to help with your ground shadows. So I'm probably going to make a whole separate video on ground shadows, so we don't want to get too deep into it, but you can adjust the opacity, just something in there that might help with ground shadows. We'll talk more about all of that in another video. Next, we have some color grading options, which are optional, so you can turn them off, and you can see it just takes a little of the contrast and the warmth away. I feel like this kind of helps tie it into the background. So let's talk about this one first. This is a color lookup, which basically it's a LUT, if you're familiar with that. It's set at 10% because a little bit goes a long way. You can increase it, which you can see really starts to get drastic. So I think 10 to 20% is probably a good sweet spot, but you can adjust it opacity wise to your liking, or you can turn it off if you don't like the look that it gives. The next thing that I have is a color grade option that works the same way. It's set at 16% opacity, so you can increase or decrease the opacity depending on how much you want it to show. But you can also change the color. This is set to soft light. It's very low opacity, so it doesn't do anything drastic, but you can also change the color. Just click on this color box, and more often than not, you're probably not going to want to do things like I don't know, pinks and greens. You probably want to stick with cool or warm, like blues, oranges, yellows, maybe red, but you can play around with it. You can see what it looks like by just moving it around. It's very subtle changes, but you can make it warm, or you can even make it cool if you were to come into the blues. Just another option which you can use or you can turn off. All right, getting towards the end. So now we have our, let's see, our lower text layers. Let's look at what we have in here. Very first, I have horizontal game day information. If you turn it on, let's actually go down here and turn these off. So if you use this for a game day image, I wanted to include just a horizontal text layer that you can put the game details in. So if we zoom in here, you can see, let me do some things where we can see it. Okay, so you can see that I've got it set up where the words are in white and the slashes are a different color. If you double click here to highlight everything, you can click on any of the words to highlight, click and drag. You can change what it says, you can change the color, and then you can do the same thing separately for the slashes. You just kind of work your way through, and that's how you would retain the two different colors. Of course, you can just highlight it all and just type over it. You know, it just depends on if you want to take the time to retain that look. Let's see what else we have. So we've got player name text options. Let's open that up. So there's some few options in here. With the Provocali font, we've got, by default, it's set up for first name on top, slightly overlapping the last name. You change the color of any of these just using your color picker up here in the properties or in your character. If you turn those off, I have a few other options with Provocali font. We've got player full name option, which is the same thing. It's just all one line. It has a drop shadow. All of these have a drop shadow that you can adjust if you would like. This is another single line, but I added a nice stroke on there. Kind of has like a sticker decal look, but you can change the stroke outline here and change the color up here. Let's see, didn't mean to close that. Down here I've got basically the same stuff, but just with the Hey November font. So we've got first and last name one over the other. Turn those off. We've got single line, and then of course we have our subtext here, which I have for classification: senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. It can say position, it can say a nickname, it can be anything that you want it to be. Same thing as far as changing color. It's up here in your character panel. You can turn on the stroke, which would need to be this one, and you can adjust it the same way. And then down here with the scene foam color, it's all the same things. It's just the Hey November font. Let's see, next we have the year subtext. So I've got the year here. This is the Provocali font. It's got the stroke turned on. You can turn that off. You can add the drop shadow if you want it, but change the stroke and the color the same ways. And then we have the Hey November option that you can turn on. You can pick between those two. Let's see. I always mess everything up, so we'll get it back like we had it. And that's it for the lower text. We've got another wrinkle layer, a wrinkle texture layer. So with your move tool, you can move that around and get it somewhere that you like it. Let's see. What else? I think that's about it. That's a lot. It always is. I think it's probably a good idea to touch on a few things with the MemoryMate file, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Just a few things to touch on when building your MemoryMate. We'll zip through this pretty quick. This is the dedicated MemoryMate file. You can set your MemoryMate up using this dedicated file. It does mean that you would have to recustomize the colors and the text and things like that. So I'll show you how to use this file, but then I'll also show you a little bit of a quicker way for those of you that would want to save some time. Looking at the MemoryMate file, we've got these two red folders. The bottom one, if I open it up, this is where you will want to place your team image. So before you can build your MemoryMates, you want to start with this 4x5 file. You want to build your team image. You want to save it as a JPEG and have that ready to go. So once you're ready to build the MemoryMate, open this folder. I have, let's see here, if I can find it. There we go. I have another team image that I'm going to drag and drop from my other screen. Just going to drag and drop it in here. Now we'll click on these anchor points on the side, hold down Shift to maintain the proportions. We can move it into place. You basically just want to get it close, or you may even move it a little, position it a little differently than I have it. Once you get it how you like it, hit commit. Of course, you want to turn off or delete the one that's already in there. So now you have your team image. On this folder you have your drop shadow, so you can adjust that if you want to by clicking there and opening that up. Next red folder here, we have the same thing as far as full body or no feet options. So we'll open up no feet and the subfolder. You'll drag and drop your subject images here. You can scale and position them how you like them. I will say that if you want your athlete on the right and your team image on the left, just select this folder here with your move tool, click on an anchor point, hold down shift, drag it over, and then you would repeat the same thing with this other red folder. Just click and drag it over how you like it. So sometimes this athlete's facing straight forward, sometimes you may have one that's angled to the camera left or camera right, so you can move those around, get them how you want them. We've got our lower text here, which is a little different, but it's basically the same thing. We have player name option 1, which I'll turn off, and or actually option 2 actually, and then we have option 1 where it's stacked, and then you have subtext option 1. So basically you got your option 1, you have your option 1s and your options 2s that you can go through. I won't go through all of that, but just kind of show you how that it's set up here. I think that's how we had it. So if you want to bypass setting up the repeating text and customizing the colors of the background and these borders, what I would suggest is to just open this Memory Mate. In fact, we'll get it back to how it was originally. Open this Memory Mate and have your 4x5, or I guess, yeah, your horizontal pulled up same time. You can go to Window, Arrange. We'll do 2 vertical just so you have them side by side and you can see. But you'll want to select, go to your Memory Mate file and select this bottom red folder all the way up to the top layer folder here, all of this. And then you'll click and you'll drag it over. You can come up to this tab if you're not split screen like I am and just drop it into place. So now let's get it single. Now it didn't go at the top, so I'm going to go ahead and click and drag these all the way to the top. If I had left this with the top layer selected, it would have just put them all on the top. So now let's turn off the wrinkle texture all the way down to the red folder, actually all the way down to this green folder. So it turns off everything that we don't need. Now I need to reselect. Hold down shift. I can click on one, hold down shift, click on the last one that I need. Now I'll click on this anchor point and then just click and drag it. So what I'm trying to do is get sophomore right in between those lines and get it centered up. Once you get it how you like it, you can finesse it with the arrow key a little bit, hit the check mark, and now you've got your Memory Mate set up and you don't have to customize the background colors. Okay, another long one. Hopefully I covered everything. If I didn't, shoot me an email, don@thirdcreative.com. I'll get back to you as quick as I can. That is all that I have for this one. And as always, it's time to move on to the next one. So until the next one, we'll see you.